It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. The best of times in the sense that the Lord had spoken all things into existence. The master craftsman, the master potter forming the highlight of his creation, mankind in his image. Intimately fashioned. Placing them in a garden. The first temple, where God manifested his presence to his people, walking with them in the garden, giving them all that they required, giving to them a mandate to be fruitful and to multiply and to fill the earth and subdue it, which is not simply just a command to have babies, but it is a command to expand the borders of that first temple, to fill the world with the image bearers of God, to bear God's glory and to take it forth. It was the worst of times, in the sense that we transition from Genesis 2 to Genesis 3. We are introduced to the serpent, the one who was crafty, more so than any other beast of the field. The creation over which man was given dominion now seeks dominion over him, questioning the truthfulness of God, questioning the goodness of God. Did God really say? You know, God knows that if you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he knows that your eyes will be opened and you'll be like him. The temptation of the serpent to the woman was to willingly participate in their own death and destruction and enjoy it. To walk away from the command of God, to call into question the command of God, to seek for themselves to be God. And the irony of the whole thing is they were like God. They were his image bearers. And so they take of the fruit of the tree and they eat it. And nothing's the same from that point forward. Where they were naked and unashamed, now there is shame. They seek to cover themselves, to hide. God comes, manifests himself in the presence of the garden, seeks them out. Where are you at? And they hide. They hide from God, covering themselves from one another, hiding from God. Where there was once intimacy of fellowship, now shame and fracture. The consequence of that first sin plunges the world into darkness, as it were. It introduces pain, toil, and the disposition to self-idolatry. God speaks in judgment in Genesis 3 to the serpent, to the woman, and to the man. To the woman he says, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. To the man he says, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree which I commanded you not to eat, cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. Pain and toil now introduced into the created order. Work was not a consequence of the fall. Pain and toil in work is a consequence of the fall. And not only that, pain and toil even in relationships with one another. Do you remember what Adam said when God questions, "Who told you you were naked?" God, I'm going to step out of this one. You gave her to me. This is between you two. And from that point forward, everything is done in pain and toil. Even great things. You get to Genesis chapter 4, and there is examples of culture building. Great things being done, music, architecture, wonderful things. But these things are being done not in a way that honors God, not for the glory of God. The expansion of culture is not being done for the glory of God. How do we know that? Because ultimately we get to further along in Genesis and God judges humanity. The wickedness in their hearts was great. Everything that they were doing, every thought and intention of their hearts was toward evil, death, and destruction. And though God sort of begins anew with Noah and his family, it doesn't take long, and humanity's right back at it. Genesis chapter 11, the Tower of Babel. Let us make a name for ourselves. Let us build this great edifice that reaches all the way to the heavens, so that we will make a name for ourselves. Adam and Eve were not content to be in the image of God. They wanted to be God. And in all that people do, for the sake of culture, the disposition of our heart is towards self-idolatry, to draw attention to ourselves, to make a name for ourselves. We talked about the curse on the man, the curse on the woman, and we left off the curse on the serpent. Because in that, despite the fallenness of man, despite the introduction of death and destruction on account of sin, there is a promise. A promise of one who would come and crush the head of the serpent, a deliverer. One who would come to right things, to redeem things, to turn our hearts from that propensity toward idolatry of self that leads to death and destruction, and give us a new heart. A heart no longer of stone, but a heart of flesh. Man in the garden sought to be God. We will determine what is right and wrong. We will, in our own enlightened state now, our desire to reach our full potential, we will be God. But the Apostle Paul tells us that the one who would come to redeem, who though it was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Here's the good news. That though we seek to be God, to draw attention to ourselves, to self-idolize, in all that we do, the one who was very God came and took the form of a servant, dying in our place to give us new life. So that the full expression of what we do in response to the gospel and the one who was God and who came is redeemed beauty in all that we do, because we have been given a new heart. We have been given a new life.